a wife for you. Do whatever the Lord calls you to do.
Probably have perimeter somewhere, right?
Yeah, you're good.
Stay in frame.
You're good.
I might just stand up and do one of these.
That's great. Yeah, that's nice and wide. You have to there. I just, yeah, you're good. So we're good here.
Good.
Well, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. Yeah.
It is. Isn't it beautiful?
It really is.
Oh, my goodness. It's wonderful. Thanks for coming. It's an interesting subject for a conference like this, because you think everything's got to be like really spiritual. And the thing about finances and money is it can take the spirit out of us.
Right?
If we don't, get a grip with it. So it is very appropriate, and I credit Pastor Dustin for having the insight, and he was excited. My wife and I started joining. My wife's name is Leslie, and I'm Les Nineow. We started coming about 6 months ago, and I've had a financial ministry for almost 3 decades now. I got trained originally by a man named Larry Burkett. Now, he's an old voice from 70s, 80s, going into the 90s. Unfortunately, he's been deceased now almost 20 years, so this world's not the same without him. But I was a fanboy of Larry's. I was just getting started, and he was actually the one, before I got started, he was the one that influenced me to even have an interest in this to begin with. So that's kind of my story. Is everybody from here? Are there from out-of-towners with us? California or Arizona? Kansas City? Santa Fe? Fe? Is it Fe or Fee? Fe. Sorry. I figure I might as well say it correctly. Santa Fe. All right, so a lot of out-of-towners. Okay. Anybody from this area?
Originally?
All right, so our out-of-towners came today. All right, you're from right here. Okay, good. So my sister is here, Laura. She's visiting from Texas.
Hi, Laura.
So she represents the great state of Texas. Our twin state, we like to call it. We have a lot of similarities. But the reason I'm passionate about this, now I've been a trained financial coach, and I do it professionally now, like I say, for almost 30 years. I actually, at this point, work for a guy named Dave Ramsey. He's kind of a crazy guy. He's been on the radio about 3 decades. And so I absolutely love what I get to do. I love that I get to help people in this area of personal finance. And I thought today, as we're getting together and talking about this, I want to help you with some practicality, but at the same time, I want to maybe help you get to know me a little bit and my story and why I'm doing what I'm doing, and how God has been able to use what I've just given to him. And so I stand up here almost like the Apostle Paul, in that, he said he was like the chief of sinners, and he doesn't know why God chose him. And well, I was the chief of stupid when it came to money. Paycheck to paycheck was my middle name. And I could do it as good as anybody before they were actually keeping track of that kind of thing. That was, half my adult life, which is in the past. But I'm going back all the way to 1985. Some of you may not have been born. I won't ask. But 1985, I remember having a job at a plant up originally from Wisconsin in the Milwaukee market. And I was in this plant, and I was sharing an office with this guy. And this guy had the nicest clothes. I mean, sweaters and pants, the nicest shoes. They were always shining. He had the nicest cars, and home was beautiful back then. This is $250,000 home back in '85. So for me, this was something. I was pretty impressed with this guy. He was probably a little younger than I was, but I was not having things that were very nice. It was the opposite. I was, you might say, bargain discount clothing, and I couldn't afford, unless I was borrowing for it, I couldn't afford nice things. And I was actually staying in a house that was upstairs from this old Slovakian woman. She was in her mid-80s, and she just rented it off. We came from a house originally bought from my parents, which was a really big mistake. I could have a conference on just how not to buy a home, because that's what my wife and I did. Made all the mistakes you could possibly make. And so some of you will remember the Jimmy Carter years. Anybody remember? You have to go back a long time, but when we purchased this home in the early 80s, it was 14% interest. And so our mortgage was $820 a month back in 1984. I was making the payment for my dad, and it was $360 for his. So just by signing the paper and making up mine, it became $820 a month. And then with utilities, just basic housing, it was like $1,100 every month. I was making $1,600. And my wife decided to stay home and have children, so it was tough going. But for about 4 or 5 years, we struggled, and I was like that hamster on the wheel. You know how you work and work and work and getting nowhere. And so I remember that feeling of feeling just down and feeling hopeless. I don't know if any of you ever felt that way financially, but I just felt like I was never going to get anywhere at any time. And I remember we had an opportunity to actually sell our home and get into this apartment that I just mentioned. It was a flat upstairs from this woman. It was only $230 our rent, which I was really excited about. But that very first month that we were in that apartment, we had about $400 to our name. We would not have been able to make our mortgage payment that month. And so God was definitely, even though I was not real bright, God was good enough to kind of oversee what I was doing and help us providentially. And so that was the 1 month we would not have been able to make our payment. That would have been the first month, but probably the first of many. We just simply were overloaded and took on too much for what we were making. I didn't know better, but in this case, I'm with this guy. Now, this place that I was staying in, it was upstairs, like I said. It was just a flat, and there was a bathroom off the kitchen, and it just had a little claw tub, no shower. So the way you showered, when you'd sit in the tub and you'd have this little hose connected to the faucet, and it was little, and you'd hang it over your head, and that was your shower. I would wake up in the morning and flip the kitchen light on, and there'd be like a dozen centipedes that would scatter because it was infected inside the walls. And so this is the lifestyle that I've got, and I'm thinking, well, I don't know about this. And here I'm sitting with this guy that seems to me, has everything. And all of a sudden one day I noticed he was sitting there cutting coupons. And I was like, why would he cut coupons? And finally I said it, I couldn't hold it in any longer. I said, why would you cut coupons? I don't get it. You of all people. He says, Les, how do you think I got everything I have? He says, Les, I'm going to tell you something you're never going to forget. And you know what? He was right, because I still tell the story today. He said this, he said, Les, any fool can spend money. I thought about that. At that time, I was like, okay, I'm going to have to chew on that for a little bit. Of course, now I've come to understand exactly what he's talking about. It takes nothing. It takes no thought process. It takes no intentionality to just spend. Today, it's so easy to spend, right?
Right.
I mean, literally, we've heard reports of dogs getting credit cards.
Wow.
Literally, in the dog's name. This is how crazy the whole system is. People are just numbers. They just get out there and they market people. And there's been dead people that have gotten, credit offers. I'm getting them to refinance my mother's home, who has been dead for 16 years, has never lived in Tennessee, and yet they have my home attached to my mother. They call her Joanne. Her name was Joan. So this marketing is out of control. So to his point, again, way back in 1985, any fool can spend money. Well, it took me on a journey, because one particular night I was struggling, and I remember at the time I had a mindset. My mindset was this. My tools would lay on the floor in the garage or lay on the floor off against the wall in the shed, and it'd be rusted and they'd be, dirty. But this is the thing. If you loaned me something of yours, I would make sure that I scrubbed it and cleaned it and gave it back to you in better condition than you gave it to me. Now, why would I do that? Because I respected the fact that you let me use it.
Right.
And it was yours. And so there was no problem with that. In fact, there was a guy at work that I was working with, and he loaned me his weed eater because I didn't have one at the time. So I used it, and I did exactly what I just described. I took it apart and scrubbed it and cleaned it, and I gave it back to him. He said, Les, he said, that thing didn't look that clean coming out of the box. I said, well, it's yours. I wanted to honor you. I wanted to give it back to you in better condition than you gave it to me. He says, is there something else I can loan you? And so he caught on quickly. I could use this. But that was my mindset. So here I am sitting inside my living room. I think my wife was sleeping, kids were sleeping, and I'm just done. I don't know if you ever felt that way financially. It's like, I'm done. I don't know what else I'm going to do here. Hopeless. Hamster on the wheel again, right? And so as I was doing that, I just got up and went to get something, and there was, I hope this doesn't freak you out, but next to the bed, it was dark, and I left the light off because I think my wife was sleeping, but next to the bed, there was a little bookshelf with just two little shelves. It was about this high, but there was a sparkle coming from the bottom shelf, and I thought, what is sparkling? And I got just close enough, and it was a particular book, and this particular book had that lamination. Did you ever see one of those books got like lamination on it? And the moon was shining through the window and laminating or reflecting off that lamination. So from a distance, it literally looked like it was sparkling. Like, look at me, right? So I go over and I pull it out, and it said, Your Finances in Changing Times by Larry Burkett. Huh. That's one of those things where, God, you don't have to hit me with a 2x4. I get it. I'm supposed to read it, right? I pulled it out, and I remembered that we had gotten a series of these books by Larry Burkett at the church that we were engaged. We were going to be going through some pre-marriage classes, and they gave it to us as a wedding gift. And so for 5 years, it just sat on the shelf. That's what everybody does, right? You get that nice gift to help you in the beginning of your marriage, and you just let it sit there. And so I went through 5 years of misery that I didn't have to if I'd have just grabbed it. And this particular night, I think I was ready. So I grabbed it and I started reading, and he's giving these, lessons on finance and being smart with it. But he says this, he had a picture of a mountain, and then there was a little white snow cap at the top of the mountain. And he described that little snow cap as the tithe. Now, we've all heard that term, tithe, right? And I thought, oh, that's what this is about. You want me to tithe. Of course, we were giving, but no, we weren't tithing. I was like, well, Lord, yeah, we could tithe. I'll have a talk with my wife. And I thought, okay, we're square, we're good. I turned the page, and Larry said this. He's like, okay, but after you tithe, the mountain is still his. Who? Whoa. You remember my mindset? If it's yours, I'm going to respect it. I'm going to treat it right. If it's mine, all this while I thought, it's my money. Do what I want with it, right? All of a sudden, for the first time in my life, in my heart of hearts, I understood it was God's. It wasn't mine.
Amen.
Oh, my goodness. I hit my knees. I literally hit my knees and repented and cried and told the Lord, I'm sorry. I get choked up thinking about it now. But that's when I first understood true stewardship and the power in and the importance of understanding that as God's people. And so true stewardship is truly, he owns it. It's his. Everything. He owns the cattle on 1,000 hills we hear in Scripture, right? And he also, by the way, owns the hills that host the cows.
Yeah.
And so this is what I learned to understand, and it was a game changer. And it seemed like almost instantly I sensed in my heart and in my mind that I was going to help others understand this. I didn't know what that was going to look like or how that was going to play out. We moved to Tennessee. I worked double shifts. I was working all kinds of overtime because I wanted to be completely out of debt when we came to Tennessee. I wanted a clean start. And, oh, by the way, my wife came from a family of savers. I came from a family of spenders. And so when we got together, did you know that opposites attract? Those of you that are married. Yeah. In fact, Larry Burkett famously has said that if a husband and wife are the same, one of you is unnecessary. And so the reality is it's a good thing that we're different because we kind of rub the rough edges off of each other, right? But I remember my wife and I, when we got married, I found out that she had $1,000 saved. And I thought to myself, she might as well have said $1 million, because to me, I never saved $1, right? You have $1,000? Now, we were engaged, so I thought, okay, this could be kind of like mine, right? Well, did you ever go to one of those state fairs? They call them like rubbish ramas things, you know? You go and they have all the booths and all the people selling stuff. But it was at a state fair in Wisconsin. And I said, hey, we should probably go to this thing. You know, we need things like broom and dustpan and rolling pin. She looked at me, really? You need a rolling pin? I'm thinking, oh, she's making cookies, right? But this is the thing. We go there and we come back. And we had the rolling pin, and we still have that rolling pin. Ice cream scooper, we still have that ice cream scooper from that trip. But we also came back with a TV, a VCR, a cabinet to put it all in. Spent her $1,000.
Wow.
Now, she let me spend it because she loved me, right? I taught her how to go to restaurants. I taught her how to spend frivolously. And I kind of dragged her down to the dark side, right? And so now all of a sudden I get this transformation, the renewing of my mind, thank you, Lord. And I have to come back to her and say, well, we got to switch everything up now. We got to start saving. We got to stop spending. We got to stop going out to eat. We got to start getting out of debt. She goes, whoa, wait a minute. You just taught me how to act like this. Now you're going to draw me back the way I was when I met you? Yeah. And so we had an adventure with that. But that's what we ended up doing. And we did come to Tennessee with absolutely no debt, wrote off the checks. I forgot to say that I actually borrowed money from my father-in-law when we purchased that home. My father, who owned the home, I bought it from my own parents. I ended up borrowing money from him, the down payment, which I didn't have, by the way. Remember, I said every mistake possible. I had no down payment whatsoever. So my father covered it on paper. So the bank said, good, the seller's going to cover the down payment. But we had a handshake agreement that I would pay him back $100 a month. So that's why it was like $1,400 a month on a $1,600 income. Not smart. So here we completely paid off both parents. We paid off all the credit cards, paid off all the debt. And we're on our way to Tennessee with $300 to our name. Fresh start. But I go to the church in Columbia here. It's south about 40, 50 miles. But I ended up teaching Larry Burkett classes and encouraging others. And then I was also just talking to people, and my pastor came up and said, you know, Les, you really are into this. You really are passionate about this. What I had read in some, that was before the internet, but he said, I read in some publication that Larry Burkett actually teaches people how to do this and be counselors and help people in area finance. He said, would you be interested in that? I said, oh my goodness, yes, absolutely. So he sent me to Georgia, and I spent a week there with Larry Burkett's team and got officially trained to be a financial counselor. They called them back in the days. Today it's all financial coaching. But I came back and I started helping people individually, and I was really excited to do that. And we have a train. And he's going to make a lot of noise when he goes by. Thank you. We hear you. Okay. It may not be a long one. We'll see. The noise has got past us, I think. All right, so we had a fresh start in Tennessee, and I was excited. And so I started helping people, and to me, it was just so important for me to help others see and understand what I did, because I knew what a difference it made for my wife and me and our marriage and our plans, our future plans. And so I had the pleasure of meeting this Dave Ramsey guy way back in the early 90s when he was just getting started. And again, it allowed me to help people in a unique way that I wouldn't have had on my own. And so to me, it was like a double dip, first Larry Burkett and then Dave Ramsey. It's like I was in good hands. And so I was real grateful to the Lord for that. So today, I try to teach people as a full-time coach. I try to teach people the idea of this concept of stewardship and even money in the Bible. Like I said, why would we have this today, right here with this conference? And the reality is, the Bible, Larry Burkett, he when he got into the whole thing, he said he wanted to know exactly what God had to say about the Bible and money. And so he started going verse by verse, thankfully, because I didn't have to, because he did it for us. But he went in verse by verse from Genesis to Revelation, right? And he highlighted every verse that mentioned money. And he was sure that it was going to be about 100 verses. And when his assistant counted it all up and did his work for him, came back, it was 700 verses in the Bible that mentions money. Why would God do that? And if you talk about the concept and behavior around money that doesn't specifically mention money, just the concept and idea and our thoughts about it, it's thousands of scriptures that allude to the idea of handling money and being stewards with it. So why is it so important to God, this whole money thing? Anybody have an idea? This is where we get interactive. What do you think? Why is it important to God? Is money the root of all evil? The love of money is the root of all evil. Yes?
You know what I found out about why God loves a cheerful giver?
A cheerful giver?
Is that when I had a lot of money, I didn't realize that I was giving a lot of money away. The resources that I was able to feed people. People had places to live. They could live in my house. I could feed them. I could drive them places. I took the elderly places. I had things when I didn't have any money. I mean, I could still be kind. I could still do things with them and for them physically, but I couldn't do as much without the resource. We need money to take care of God's people.
That's a good, and we could hear her. That's a good lead in to a story that I have. I was actually doing this is probably in the early 90s, but I was doing at the church on a Sunday night. We had Bible study on Sunday nights, Sunday school on Sunday nights, because we were meeting at a college. And so I was teaching this class, Larry Burkett material, and we were just having discussions, and we were talking about building wealth. And we had a good discussion, and we'll talk a little bit about that today. But I remember getting done, and everybody was leaving, and this older woman, she, to me, I was younger, she was older, she's probably the age I am now. But she came up to me, meant well, but she said, do you mind if I ask you a question? I said, no. She says, in fact, I kind of have an opinion. She goes, do you mind if I just give you my opinion? I said, no, please. She said, building wealth as Christians, she says, isn't that kind of selfish? And I went, okay, maybe. Do you mind if I'm real honest with you? And she said, sure. I said, if you don't want to build wealth as a Christian, I think that could be selfish. To your point.
Right, exactly.
How many people can you help if you're broke? I was born broke. Well, I wasn't born broke. What kind? I guess I was born with nothing, right? But my family did not have a lot of money. And so we were broke, but you know what we weren't? We weren't poor, right? You know the difference? So broke is the reality of the money or the lack of money, right? That's broke. But poor is a mindset. And it's a victim mentality kind of thing, right? And so we're not poor, even if we don't have a lot of money. We might be broke. And so that's what I told her. I said, no, we don't want to be poor. If we can help it, we don't even want to be broke. Because how can we help others?
Right.
If you're really unselfish, you want to gather as much as you can. My wife and I are at a point now where we go to a restaurant, I'm excited to give 30, 40% tips. Before it was hard to even give 20. It's like, I don't know if I can. But now I get excited to give the extra 20, 30, 40, sometimes 50% tip, especially if they really do a wonderful job and they're really good hostesses or waitresses or waiters. And it's fun to have the extra money if you do it with the right mindset. And that's what God wants from us. The reason he talks about money so much, because again, it can be a stumbling block, and he doesn't want it to be. He doesn't want it to be a barrier from us to have the joy of the Lord that he talks about us having. And so he wants us to have life and life abundantly, right? And where's the abundant living if we're stuck in debt and hamster on a wheel like I was for so many years? Where's the abundant joy in that? And God knows that. And so I would like to share a couple stats. I don't want to depress you, but I just want to kind of give us all a wake-up call of where we're at as a society. Americans as a whole, own more than 1.2 trillion in educational debt. Now, our government is trying to help that, right, and help people along with that, and that's okay. I'm not a big fan of depending on the government, but if they're going to help, at least hopefully these people that have it can get a little head start on getting rid of it. But with the average student loan hovering just under $20,000, or $29,000, that is. That's the average student loan debt, $29,000. Okay, meanwhile, the average car loan, you ready for this, hit an all-time high of more than $30,000 is the average. $30,000 for a car. That kicks the average monthly payment past $500 a month. Some of you may identify with that. I know I did. My last car payment was $500 a month. Long time ago. Credit cards have an average balance of more than $15,000 right now, and there are more than 1.4 billion open credit cards in the United States alone. Now this is what we have, and this is what God's trying to give us a little warning on. The solution. Do you know that only 57% of households actually have a budget? So almost half do not. Now, if I'm stepping on your toes, I'm glad. Okay, so personal finances and money in 2021, here we go. We're consistently ranked as the #1 stressor among Americans. More so than health, family, and even career. The #1 stressor, money. 52% of Americans in debt said that their personal finances caused them to lose sleep. 52%, over half of Americans losing sleep over their finances. 52% are actually worried about their money. I actually saw a new one that said 59% of Americans are worried about their money. 78% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. Almost 8 out of 10 people are waiting for payday just to get by. I came to give life, and life abundantly.
Amen.
Is that abundant living?
No.
Oh, I can't wait for Friday. I get paid. I can't wait for the 15th. We'll be able to make it. We'll be able to pay that utility, right? That's not abundant living, especially God's people. But this is the difficulty with God's people. We're no different than the unchurched.
Wow.
Just as many divorces,
Yeah.
just as many bankruptcies, just as many counseling sessions. And yet we have God's word to lead us to do this better. And so that's why God has so many scripture in there to help us as his people just do better and not have to fall into all these stats that I just shared with you. Any Australians? I know we have Australians here for the week, but any in here? I was hoping I did, because I figured that they'd think they were all fit, but no, 52% of Australians live paycheck to paycheck. Okay? And 60% of Australians are worried about their money, 1% higher than Americans.
Wow. They're telling.
And 25% of Australians are living
Yeah.
paycheck to paycheck with $150,000 to $200,000 income. Still living paycheck to paycheck. So this isn't even an American thing. This is just a world thing. And I think it's a spiritual thing.
Yeah,
I really do.
definitely that.
I really do. And so I've got some practical steps that we actually teach over at Ramsey Solutions. And I've walked people through this as a coach one-on-one. And I'd like to share those steps with you, if it'd be all right. Just give you some, they talk about in scripture about building a house and who would do that first. When you build a house, obviously you've got to have plans, right? And so my assistant, my sister, she's going to give you a handout.
Hey.
And I'd take you over Vanna any day. Okay. But so this is just kind of like the blueprint of we feel like is a good way to walk through your personal finances. It's just very practical, and I'd like to talk you through that. And some of this is obviously backed by scripture. And so what I'm going to do is walk us through that and share some of those verses. So the very first thing before we even start the baby steps, is in order to fulfill any kind of plan, guess what we got to have? A plan. To fulfill a plan, we need a plan, and it's called a budget. Now, some people don't like that word budget because they think restricted. Ooh, I can't do anything. Actually, I like to call it a financial plan, but it is a budget. Now, it's interesting with a budget. If you go to time management classes, they will tell you in these conferences, if you just plan your time better, you will gain more time. Now, we can look at our watch and go, well, it doesn't look like I have more digits on there. How do I gain more time? You can't get more than 24 hours in a day, right? 7 days a week. What they're meaning by that is if you actually plan your time better, you'll have less wasted time. And with less wasted time, you have more productive time because you've wasted less. Budget works exactly the same way financially. If you plan your money, and we like to do that before we actually get the money in our hands, have a plan for it. Who's ever taken a vacation, just got in the car and just took off? I'll bet you planned your vacation, didn't you? You probably knew where you were going. You probably knew how long you were going to stay there. You probably knew what hotel you were going to stay in, or maybe with family. But you had this all planned out, didn't you? Then you get in the vehicle and you just fulfill that plan, right? You just live it out. That's all this is. I'm getting this much money, this next check. What am I going to do with every dollar? What am I going to do with it? That's all a budget is telling your money where to go rather than your money just going. Has anyone ever thought, I have too much month at the end of this money? If you're normal, you probably thought that at some point. I know I did. But so this helps prevent that. And so in a real practical sense, we've got to have a plan, and we've got to do this intentionally, on purpose, and just, it's not restrictive. You can still spend the money however you want, but guess what's going to happen? You're going to probably make different decisions when you think about it ahead of time. Because whenever, the most effective marketing, did you ever have a phone call? Well, you got to, this has got to be done today. This is only for today. And sometimes even in the stores, you'll hear that. This is only for today. And they kind of rush you into the decision, don't they? And they know that that's marketing because if you think through it, you'll probably decide not to do it. But on the moment, in urgency, you make decisions that you go back and go, oh man, I shouldn't have done that. And so this is the same way. If you plan your money ahead of time, you're probably going to do better with it. You're going to make better decisions because you're going to second guess yourself. And when I used to sit down with people years ago, I'd have 2 lines and I'd have 3 rows, and I'd have needs, wants, desires. And you could do this ahead of time. What are my needs just to get by, my basic essential needs? What are they? Now, what are my wants? Oh, what would be my desires, right? I need a car. I want one of those Camaro convertibles, right? Maybe Mustang convertible, yeah. But I desire one of those Corvettes, right? So, right now I'm still in the need, and so I've got a 2011 Ford Focus, right? So I haven't moved to that convertible. I'm probably close though, but see, need, want, desire. But you know what we do without a budget? We jump into those desires sometimes those wants, and then we find later, oh, we got that medical situation, we didn't anticipate that, and now that's a need that we can't even meet without the debt, without paying the hospital for the next 2 years, right? Because we went and fulfilled our wants and our desires. And so all this does when you plan a budget ahead of time is it helps you think more clearly, and it helps you be more responsible with your decision making around money and purchases, right? So that's where we start. And then if you're behind, we say, work extra hours, just stop spending and just catch up. Catch up to where you're not behind so that you're making all the payments that you're supposed to be making. Now once you're caught up, first thing we want you to do, baby step 1, is we want you to save $1,000. Boy, I remember when my wife had that $1,000. It was a big deal. But that sounds like, for some of you, that's probably really big. And for some of you, you're going, yeah, I think we could do that if we really focus in and really work at it, right? And so what is that $1,000? We call it the mini emergency fund. You probably heard that term, emergency fund. Emergency fund is simply, we call it fighting off, what's that guy called? What?
Mayhem?
Oh, mayhem. Yeah, that's the famous one now. That's good. Murphy was the old term years ago. Murphy will, move into the back bedroom, right? If you're not prepared. So yeah, it keeps mayhem out of your life, keeps Murphy away. This is like a financial safety net. And it's just sitting there. And I'll talk about, because in the budget, if you're really planning the budget, guess what you have to do? You have to not only plan for what you're spending every month, but you have to think about what's coming due 2 months from now, 6 months from now. Hey, what if you're planning a vacation 2 years from now? When do you start preparing for that? I think you could prepare for it now. Especially if it's going to be, a cruise or something. That's not going to show up overnight, so you're going to have to, say it's simple math, $2,400 2 years from now. Well, $100 a month, put away. You know what we call that? We call that a sinking fund. It's just a simple savings account that you put money away. Anybody remember the old Christmas funds? Where you would put it in the fund, and then you could pick it up in December and there was all your Christmas money, right? Well, these are the same concepts, only it's for different things. It might be for an insurance policy that you pay in September every year. And so you would put so much aside every month in your budget, and you would put it into the savings every month, and it would just build up, so that when that September, you can just write the check for that life insurance. My wife and I have long-term care. We're at that age, and it's not cheap, but it's like $270 a month or something. But come every fall, we can write a check for that $2,800, whatever it is, and we save $200 every year just by writing one check and not doing it every month, because every month they'll have process fees and all that kind of thing. And so just by planning that and having our own sinking fund, that's $200 on one insurance policy, the long-term care. And you do that with your car insurance. If you pay every month, you're paying process fees every month. So if you learn to just do this yourself and set this money aside, you can save yourself some money there. Yes?
Do you keep track of that on a spreadsheet, that I'm putting this much away for this and that, because there's multiple?
She asked about a spreadsheet and how you keep track of that. You can do an Excel spreadsheet if you're one of those fancy people and you do Excel, right? My wife and I, we're a little older. We don't get into all that. Guess what we have? We have a notebook and we have a piece of paper with, I don't know if this will discourage you or encourage you, but my wife and I have 25 sinking funds.
Wow.
And you know how we manage it? We get paid, right? And at the end of the month, what we do is we got all 25, and we know that this first one is $30, and the second one is $20, that third one is $100, and we know what they all are, we know the total, and we take that total and we just put it into a savings account. On the paper, we will just show that we deposited each individual balance for each item.
But it's in the same account, though.
It's the same savings account. You just know what the individual breakdown is just on paper. Or you can do Excel, whatever, however you work with that. But it literally takes us about 10 minutes a month to manage 25 sinking funds. You just have to be intentional, and you have to just follow through and do it, right? But some of those are fun. Now, guess what? When we had COVID, guess what? My wife couldn't work because she's a hairstylist at assisted living. She was not allowed to go in for about 5 months, I think it was, 6 months. So we literally had less income, and we had to immediately have a budget meeting. Those are fun. We actually don't mind doing them anymore. Years ago, it was interesting. But we had a budget meeting, and we had to look at how much we had for our sinking funds, and we could only actually fund 8 of them without her check. So that's what we did. We cut out the needs, or we cut out the wants and the desires in the sinking fund. She has things like a garden fund where she buys flowers and buys shrubs in the spring, and so she saves all year for that. She can do that in the spring. I have a golf fund. Any golfers in the crowd?
I'm interested in your 25. I mean, I'm really interested.
So yeah, some of these are fun. Vacation. Obviously, we weren't planning vacation when we had COVID. I wasn't golfing. She wasn't worried about the garden. And so we cut out almost all of our sinking funds. We only had 8 that were kind of necessary, like the long-term care, life insurance, things like that. And so we just went to the flat needs. Now, you don't always have to just go flat needs, but there's times in life where we have to be prepared to do that. And so if you know ahead of time what your needs, wants, and desires are, you can actually do that like we did, and it only took us about 30 minutes to adjust everything. And so you have to prepare the best you can, and then life can happen. My sister has a couple trees that are coming on top of her house and actually leaning on her gutters. They're literally growing into the house. And so she says, well, how should I cover that? I said, you have an emergency fund? Yeah. There you go. She goes, well, I could have thought of that. In fact, I did, but I thought maybe you had some kind of magic wand you could. Nope. And so, that's what the emergency fund is for. Things that you can't plan for, you can't expect necessarily. Yes.
The Kansas City Water Department, my meter busted in my house, in my office, so my whole business downstairs flooded.
Oh, she had a flood because the meter broke.
I was in there.
Yeah.
It flooded me too.
And did you have emergency savings?
I had to use my but I still didn't have enough. But because I'm still fighting the city, so but they're actually they're taking the carpet out and putting the walls out now while I'm here.
Good.
You never know when things are going to happen. Life does happen, and we're not exempt from
Life.
sometimes
Yep.
bad things happening, right? And financially, that does impact us. This is why we prepare with these things. And so when I think of savings, you know what I think about? When I was a kid, maybe you did this too, I don't know. When I was a kid, I used to just look at the ants. Did you ever just study ants and watch them? And I was so intrigued. I was probably 6, 7 years old, whatever, and I would watch them. They'd carry things that were 3 times their body size, and they would drag them across. And I was like cheering them on. I was, 'cause I was the kid that, I had that personality. I have high mercy. I did spiritual gift tests, and I'm just high mercy.
Yeah.
And when I would walk, I would just make sure I wasn't stepping on ants, And I had friends that would purposely step on them. So we just had different personalities. But I would study these ants, and I was so intrigued. And then when I started doing this and helping people, I read Proverbs 6:6-8. And God said this, take a lesson from the ants, you lazy bones. That's literally what it says. This is this particular New Living Translation. Learn from their ways and become wise. Though they have no prince or governor or ruler to make them work, they labor hard all summer gathering food for the winter. I didn't know that's what they were doing. They were gathering all that food and taking it into their little home, and then they would eat on that food during the winter. Because I didn't see them with the snow, especially in Wisconsin, ice and snow. And I thought, isn't that interesting? God tells us to observe the ant. And this ant, with no leader necessarily, no ruler to make them work, they do it out of common sense. If an ant can have common sense to take care of themselves, can't we? God's people, and God is gracious enough to give us a verse like that. This is how simple it is, people. Save some money so that when life happens, you can take care of it.
Our pastor did a message on that, and ants play such a big role in the entire ecosystem. So it's not even just for us, but like just being a good steward. It's also, it goes back to being a blessing to others too.
Absolutely.
Hey.
Yeah. You had a
I
question?
was listening
No,
to Pastor
she
Justin.
was talking about me.
Oh! Well, at least you're here. She's not talking behind your back.
At least you got it.
Proverbs 21:20 is interesting too. In the New King James Version, I like the way they said, there is a desirable treasure and oil in the dwelling of the wise. So God's attributing the wise to having desirable treasure and oil, but a foolish man squanders it. So God's distinguishing the foolish, the wise. Who wants to be wise?
I do.
You know what he says then? Save some money and have this thing sitting there to be able to depend on, kind of like the ant, they had that sitting there. And so I like that. Baby step 1, you got that $1,000. Baby step 2, Where is it? I printed 2 sides. Okay. Baby step 2 is what? Pay off all debt. Yep. Pay off all debt other than the mortgage. Other than the mortgage. Because the mortgage is usually going to be a little higher. The average mortgage payment or balance is almost $180,000 right now. So it'd be tough to do that quickly. But pay off all debt. That includes cars, student loans, credit cards, just kind of like we did before we came here in 1990. Just get rid of all the debt and have a fresh start. Be able to start over. There's an interesting proverb, New Living Translation. The rich, this is God here, the rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender. Who wants to be a slave? We don't sign up for that, do we? But we do without realizing it. And guess what? This is not only a reality because they can actually foreclose on you if you miss payments to your home. They could actually take your car and repo it. I mean, they can control your life. And they can make your life miserable. You literally are like a slave to them. But even greater than that, spiritually, God's people were never intended to be slaves. We saw that story. They walked through raging water, to not be slaves, right? God doesn't want us to be slaves. And so one way he says, don't borrow. Don't owe another man. And so the borrower is slave to the lender. We can avoid that. Psalm 37:21 says, the wicked borrow and do not pay. Now, just because you're borrowing, you're not wicked. Let me clarify that. So money is the equivalent of a brick. A brick, it's almost amoral, right? You could take a brick and you could hit someone in the head with it, throw it right at their head, right? It's a bad brick. You could take that same brick and you could build a hospital with it, build a church with it.
Yeah.
Good brick, right? And so money is what you do with it.
Right.
And so here, the Psalm says, the wicked borrow and do not pay. That's why they're wicked. They do not pay. But the righteous give generously.
Amen.
I love that. You see where God's trying to guide us through this? He's really trying to help us. He's trying to free us to be the best we can. Again, we're stewards of his ownership. We're trying to honor him. Just like I did, scraping and cleaning off that weed eater, right? We have to try to honor God in the way we handle money. So we're trying to get out of all of the debt. A quick way to do that is to list all of your debt. We call this a debt snowball. List all of your debt, smallest to largest, the smallest balance. So it doesn't matter what the interest rate is. It would make sense if you have an 18% interest and a 5% interest, you'd pay off the 18% interest first. That makes sense by math, but if we were doing math, there wouldn't be any debt. Okay? I'm just going to call that out, right? And so let's not do math, let's do emotion. Because what we want to do is we want to get motivated. How many people have ever tried to exercise? Right? And the best way to exercise is to actually make that first move. And when you can get that first move, maybe at first you're kind of imbalanced and you can't kind of balance, and then after a while you learn, hey, I can do this all day. This is getting easier. And that's what happens when you start paying off this debt. And if you start with the smallest balance first, you knock that thing out quicker, and all of a sudden you cross that off on the list and your eyes kind of light up and you go, oh, first one's gone. Boom. We hit it quick and early, and all of a sudden we get motivated and excited. And so then we go to that second one. And then what you do is, if you were paying, say you're paying $20 a month on that first debt, and say you're paying $50 a month on the second debt. But when you pay off the first one, you cross it off. Now what you're going to do is take that $20 payment and snowball it down to the second debt. So now instead of paying $50 on the second debt, you're going to add the $20, you're going to pay $70. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And then you're going to take that $70 when you pay off the second one, you're going to roll that down to the next debt. So if you were paying $100, now you're going to pay them $170. You see how quickly you can get the momentum and pay off all this debt as you go down this debt snowball. That's the way we pay off all the debt. Baby step 3, we're going to go back to the emergency fund. The emergency fund. We're going to have a fully funded emergency fund this time. Now, the industry as a whole, and we teach it as a company, and I teach it as a personal coach, is 3 to 6 months of personal expenses. Yeah, monthly personal expenses, 3 to 6 months. So if you spend $2 a month on just, and guess what this is? Remember the needs, wants, desires? So add up your needs, and what are your monthly needs that you could not go without? You absolutely have got to put money. It might be a mortgage, it might be rent, it might be utilities, and needs, right? When you add that up, if it was $2,000 a month, then you want at least $6,000 set aside, if not 12, right? And so you determine if it's 3 to 6, depending on how well you feel about your job, how secure you feel like you are as far as your income. If it's iffy, well, they're laying some people off. I don't know. You might have had, the full 6 months sitting there, but at least 3 months of. So what happens then if you do lose your job or something happens? Say you go on disability because you had an accident or something. You could go those 3 to 6 months and not have to work and replace it with the emergency fund and use that to just get by and not miss a beat financially. So that's why you have that fully funded emergency fund. So baby step 1, we start with the $1,000, we stop it at $1,000, we get out of debt, then we move into that fully funded emergency, and we go 3 to 6 months on that one. Now the New International Version on 1 Timothy 5:8 says, anyone who does not provide for their relatives, and especially for their own household, has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. This is how we provide for our own household. We not only are paying our bills, we're not only budgeting, but we have this fully funded emergency fund to catch unexpecteds, right? Floods, trees, right? We have the fully funded emergency fund, and we're providing for our household that way.
What was the verse?
It was 1 Timothy 5:8. Yes, sir.
So if you have the number 3, do you get rid of number 1?
You're adding to 1, and it's becoming a 3. So it's 1,000 initially, and then you would just add to that 1,000 until you have a fully 3 to 6 months. Good question. Good question. Okay, does that make sense? The fully funded emergency fund? All right, baby step 4. This could get into the weeds. I'm not a certified financial planner, so I'm not going to get into the weeds. But essentially what we recommend is starting the investing, and we just say 15% of your household income. And we like the idea of just mutual funds. Now, mutual funds are just stock that are diversified. So rather than just have like GM stock, I don't know why you would do that, but rather than just have one company, anyone hear of Enron? Mm-hmm. A whole lot of people had their entire retirement investments in Enron. Enron overnight becomes worthless, and people's entire portfolio for retirement became worthless. That's called having all of your eggs in one basket, right? And so the way I like to look at that is, imagine I had, say I had 10 kids. And we had a big party in the yard for a bunch of kids. And I had my son at that time, years ago. He was pretty ambitious, and he just had a lot of fun. And everyone wanted some lemonade. And there were 10 kids total. And so I put 10 glasses of lemonade on his tray and said, well, go give it to your friends. If he trips, what happens? 10 glasses of lemonade, boom, right? That's like Enron, right? All the eggs in one basket, counted on one kid to not stumble, right? By diversifying, what I'm saying is, what if you gave 10 kids 1 glass each and had them go out? Even if 2 or 3 kids stumble, you still get 7 with lemonade, right? Your odds are better. So that's called diversify. And even the Bible talks about diversification. Invest in many ventures, New International Version, Ecclesiastes 11, 2 and I think it's 1 and 2. Ship your grain across the sea. After many days, you may receive a return. Kind of sounds like return from investment, right?
Right.
Invest in 7 ventures, yes, in 8. You do not know what disaster may come upon the land. And so what you're doing is you're basically taking the risk out of your future. So if you're investing in your retirement, you want to take the risk if at all possible. Now, anytime you're in the stock market, I'm just going to say this because it's actually on video, you can lose everything. When you invest, you can lose everything. Now, the history of the stock market doesn't prove that because it's never happened. People that were in the stock market, there were some mutual funds that were and actually available, and people were in them during the stock market crash in 1929. And they didn't lose their money unless they pulled it out. When you pull it out, then you realize the loss. If you leave it in, it's a paper loss. Did you ever hear that term? Yeah. So it just means the value is down. All you have to do is wait, and it'll come back up. The stock market over the last 80 to 100 years has been like this. I mean, it's up. It's like a roller coaster. My boss, Dave Ramsey, he likes to say this. I love it. He's like, the only ones that get hurt on a roller coaster are the ones that jump off in the middle of the ride.
Oh, good.
It's like, hang in there. We believe that this kind of investment, baby step 4, is a minimum of 5 years. Because you have to give the market a chance to correct itself. Like we've had some down months lately, even years, and it's starting to correct a little bit. But the reality is, it's a 5-year minimum for investing long term. If you're going to do like save for a car, it's just in a simple money market, which is just a glorified savings account. You don't want to invest for a car, right? You want to invest for your retirement, and that's long term. For some of you, that could be 30, 40 years. For some of us, not as far.
Question.
Yes?
Dave Ramsey, or do you guys only recommend mutual funds?
We do recommend mutual funds generally across the board because of the diversification of them. You can have 150, 200 plus funds in one portfolio, or stocks, in one portfolio. And so you're not depending on one company. So you're not going to, either way, depend on them to make you, wealthy, or you're not depending on them in case they do crash and burn. You're not going to crash and burn with them. Again, the lemonade. If you lose 3 glasses, you still have the 7. That's the concept with mutual funds. And so you want to see a professional investor. You want to see someone who does that professionally and have them kind of walk you through that. Some people try to do it on their own. I like to get with someone who knows what they're doing. We have people on the website that could probably work with you that actually agree with our philosophy and things like that. So just go to daveramsey.com and you can find a professional investor to and it doesn't cost you to sit down and just talk to somebody. But that's baby step 4. Proverbs 13:22 says, a good person leaves an inheritance for their children's children. So not only for your children, for your children's children. So guess what you have to do besides invest 15% of your income when you get to baby step 4, because it's not only for you. The idea that my wife and I have, and most people are thinking this way, you invest, and it's the essential, like the balance of your portfolio is almost like a cloud in the sky. And the goal would be for you to keep the cloud up there and just live off the rain from the cloud.
Come on.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And guess what I can do then? I can leave my children the cloud.
Hey.
And my wife and I lived off the rain.
Hey.
That's called the interest. If you do that right, and if you're diversified, you can do that. And so guess what? I also have to teach my children, like we're talking about today. I have to teach my children so that they in turn do that for their children. And that's the way I leave an inheritance for my children's children. I leave for my children, but I also teach them to help them so they can help their children. So I'm taking care of my grandchildren that way, right?
Right.
All right, so then we got baby step 5, save for your children's college. If you're at that age and you have kids that need college, if you don't, prepare for it. Now they have these things called ESAs, educational savings accounts. There's also 529 plans, which will actually help you save for college. Look into those, make those decisions for yourself, get with a professional again, what makes sense for you and your family. But if you do that ahead of time and prepare for that, remember when I said, what was the balance of the average student loan? Anybody remember? $29,000. Wow. Would you like your son or daughter to have $29,000 of debt? I sat down to do coaching for a missionary. Actually, a missionary asked me to do it as a favor. And the missionary that I met was in Antioch, which is almost towards Nashville here. And I sat down and I tried to be gracious because remember, I'm high mercy, right? And so I looked at her and I said, something is wrong with the decimal point here. I believe it's supposed to be 65,000 because student loans. And even 65,000 is a lot. She goes, no, it's over. It's $650,000.
What?
Student loans. Did you just say what? I thought I'd get a reaction. And she wasn't that concerned about it. She had people that were counseling her and saying, not professional counselors, just friends and family. And, well, it's okay. You'll be able to pay it off. Or even if you don't, it's fine. My goodness. And they're missionaries representing the Lord. But this is the thing. We can avoid that if we look at baby step 5 and think about doing these 529s, doing these ESAs, and getting this money saved. And you can have the money there for your kids, and they can go to college. There's also scholarships. We have somebody that actually goes to this church, Christina Ellard. But she and her husband go to this church, and she's a personality with Dave, and actually is on the show with him and things. But she's a champion when it comes to this. She went to Vanderbilt and got her doctorate and PhD. I know she got all these degrees, and she didn't pay a penny for it. She got all scholarships. And she actually wrote a book, it's a best-selling book. But she actually goes to this church, and she's incredible. But you can do this if you motivate your kids to actually, it's a full-time job to look for scholarships. But you don't have to automatically just create all this debt for school, for college. Baby step 6, guess what we get to do? We get to pay off our house early. So we're all done with the emergency funds are all there, and we've got the investments going, the 15%, and we've taken care of college, and now any extra dollar we have, we just throw at the house. And instead of that 15-year mortgage or 30-year mortgage, maybe you can knock it down to a 10 just by making extra payments on it, right? And so now when we're completely debt-free, no debt, no house, you owe nobody anything, oh, you know what you can do? Anything you want. Thank you. You stole my line. How'd you know? Did you see my script?
Whose line is it anyway?
You know what you can do? You can build wealth, and so you can live like no one else and give like no one else. As God's people, that's the way we should be thinking about it. Remember the woman that challenged me? You're selfish, Les. You want to actually build wealth? Well, you don't. I think you're selfish.
Right.
Right? I want to build wealth because I want to give.
Right.
I want to advance God's kingdom. So I want to get as much money as I can, as long as I have that mindset. Now, there's a guy in the Bible that he had a barn that was full. You remember this story? And he was all excited because he was going to build another barn. And you know what that's called? It's called hoarding. And that's a spiritual condition. A lot of times these manifest themselves in finance, and Larry Breakout used to famously say that this outward manifestation of the way we handle money is often just an inward condition, and it manifests in the way we spend our money and the way we actually carry out the plans for our money. So, yeah, that guy building a second barn and just storing more, that's called hoarding. And so we don't want to be hoarders. We want to build wealth so that we can live and give like no one else. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's not selfish. I think we can advance God's kingdom with that. So those are the 7 baby steps. I believe I'm done with that. Any follow-up questions, any thoughts, any concerns, any ideas?
I want that second one.
Guess we officially got about 10 minutes maybe.
Do you use the envelope system still?
Do I use the envelope system? That's an incredible question. I actually had a coaching client that was in the office with me, and we had spent, it was an hour session, and we had spent about 55 minutes kind of going through everything. And it was interesting because we had, like I said, we had about 5 minutes left, and she looked at me, she said, so Les, how can we actually do better? What can we do? I said, well, that's a good question. I said, have you thought about using envelopes, to your question? And she goes, what do you mean? I said, well, you know, when my wife and I used to, when we designed this envelope system, now inside this envelope, there's actually cash in there. Guess what this cash is for? This cash is for groceries. The only time I open this envelope is when I go into the grocery store. Yeah, it's usually Publix. Yeah. But when I pulled this out, I wish you could have seen them. They both leaned forward. Their eyes got big as saucers. And she said, is that what I said, yeah, it's an envelope system, yeah. She says, you actually do that? I said, well, wouldn't I be a fine hypocrite if I didn't? Yes, I teach this and I live it, yes. When we get paid, we take so much out for groceries and split. She has her own envelope, I have my envelope. If I go, I use mine. If she goes, she's on the other side of town, so she'll just go to Whole Foods and things. And I usually just go to Publix right over here. So we literally have done this for, oh my goodness, I'm guessing 12, 15 years. And we really, one time, it was like $17. It was like the day before payday or something. And I went in here and I took out $17 and it was completely empty. And I told the cashier, I said, boy, it's a good thing you behaved yourself because I didn't have another dollar. And we laughed about it. But that's the closest I ever got to. But guess what? You can't overspend. I would have to have taken something off because I wasn't going to use even my debit card. We don't have credit cards. My wife and I haven't had a credit card in over 20 years. But now my wife sometimes says, you know how much I could have saved at purchase at the mall if I just, take out, I could take it out and then I could just cancel it right away. I was like, and then I have to stop telling people when I talk to them that I've never had a credit card for over 20 years. She goes, well, it'd be mine. I said, no, yours is mine. Mine is yours, right?
Come on.
Now she likes to say what is yours is mine and what mine is mine. But this is, we were coming back from a vacation in Florida and she pulled out our app. There's a nice app. It's Every Dollar, it's called it. And so she pulled it up on her phone and she was, you women are like this, she was going through everything and we were just reviewing. And because we had this down for so long, I didn't look at it every month. I manage it this way and things are auto pay now. It's so simple. Our budget is simply, we have anything special going on this month? Do we have to take extra money out for entertainment? And so we just got to figure that out. But the utilities, those are auto draw, and cash, envelopes, cash for restaurants, that's a separate envelope. But anyway, I said, so how's everything look? She goes, good. She goes, you've got, because we have sinking funds, and two of those are clothing for her and clothing for me. And so I said, I have anything in clothing? I should, because I hadn't bought anything for a while. She goes, yeah, you've got, $280, whatever she said. And I said, oh, good. And I said, what about you? She goes, well, why do you want to know? I said, I don't know. I said, how much do we get for clothing anyway? I don't remember anymore. And she goes, well, you get such and such, and I get such and such. And hers was like $20, $30 higher. And I went, why is yours more? She goes, because I'm a girl. I said, I don't remember agreeing to that. But this is, even after all these years, we still have that little fun. But yeah, you got to make it fun. You have to enjoy it. But you're helping yourself by just living on a plan and doing it intentionally. But yeah, I do not go in a grocery store without this.
And where do you get those from?
This particular one is an old FPU, Financial Peace University. It's a class that Dave had. It's like 9 weeks of Dave and small group discussion and things, kind of like this. But you meet for 9 weeks. It's called Financial Peace University.
But they're everywhere.
And these were there. Huh?
But I mean, I use them too. They're everywhere.
Yeah,
like on Etsy
yeah.
or whatever. I mean, I use them.
You can. I used to just get utility envelopes when they'd come in the mail, and I would just take the paper out, and throw it away, and just use the envelope. So just. Yeah. The average, believe it or not, from 1 to 7 is like 7.5 to 8 years. 1 to 7. If somebody really gets, we call it gazelle. Because there's a scripture verse that talks about if you've been surety, if you've loaned money, if you've, put yourself up and you owe somebody, right? The way the Bible talks about it is it says, deliver yourself from the hands of the enemy like the gazelle or the deer from the lion. And if you ever watch the, what's it called? The Adventure Channel or whatever that's called, Discovery Channel, or you can see the lions chasing the deer, right, or the gazelles, and they just never seem to catch them. Those gazelles, guess what? They got motivation because that lion's got some big teeth, and they don't just wander in the field going, well, I hope I can outrun that lion. No, that gazelle's like, and the hair's back, and This is what God says in Scripture, the way we should deliver ourselves from the enemy.
Yeah.
And so if you want to get out of debt, be gazelle, right? And just really
Not Zell, Gazelle.
Gazelle. Yeah, type of deer, right?
Yeah, don't Zell people. So, I get that, like, the envelope system, if, like, people struggle with really managing their money and having a tangible way to, like, hold on to it. But for me, my mind says, like, okay, keep it in the bank, that way it attracts interest, and then when you need it, at least your money will be accruing, some kind of interest on your money.
What's the money in savings today?
Right, get it, but the mentality is that. So I was just thinking, like, instead of having the envelope system, like, actual money, could just be, like, a total, and then you can kind of just, like, okay, I spent, like, I have $100.
But you're going to use like a debit card or?
Yeah, exactly, or just something like that.
I couldn't say credit card, just debit card.
I did say, yeah, debit.
So guess what? I see where you're going with that. She's talking about just having a balance and getting a little interest on that balance rather than having cash in an envelope. If you think about you would probably get about 20 cents a month. That's what the interest is today. Guess what you're going to possibly do even using the debit card? Now, I'm not against debit cards. There's sometimes I have to use it because maybe with the car repair, I'll call her over the phone and I'll just give her, pick up the car later. But I don't give her cash, right? And so when it makes sense, I'll use a debit card for the purchase. But they tell you the debit card is either issued by a Visa or MasterCard or, they tell you that if you use their plastic card, the average consumer spends 15 to 18% more. So you think you're overspending that 20 cents of interest you get?
Yeah. Well, if anything, like, just having the actual number there, you know what I'm saying? Like, you're still, like, it's like I have $17 in an envelope, but I have just the number 17, so I can't go over that budget.
You'd have to know what's in the envelope, certainly.
Okay.
The one time I came so close, if I would have had to I would have taken something and just said, well, just put this back. Because I wasn't going to go over my 17. I only had 17 in the envelopes. I've never overspent the envelope, ever.
Right.
But that's the nice thing about that system. You can't go over unless you embarrass yourself. Well, I guess I'll have to use my card for the rest of it. It's like, I would rather take it and put it back because that's my discipline.
Yeah.
I messed up. I should have spent only what I had in the envelope. But I normally will have $20, $30 left in the envelope. So it's not even an issue. That's one thing I would recommend is that when you start this, especially with the cash system, make sure you overfund it, because the last thing you want to do when you're starting something like this is be frustrated, because I don't want to overwhelm the overwhelmed, right? And so I don't want you to be, 3-4 days before payday, and it's like, I'm out of money already. I don't know why this isn't working, right? So I'd rather have you have $10 left over, $15 left over, and feel good about what you did.
Right.
And so if you think you need 150, put 170 in there, right? Just give yourself a little buffer so that you don't run out. Yeah, I'd recommend that. I'm glad you brought that up.
Do you take the extra leftover and put it towards the?
I leave it in
The
because the next month I know that maybe I can buy that big jar of mustard, 18-pound jar, because everyone always wants that, right? Or you go to Costco.
Yeah, no,
You go to Costco.
Yeah,
I mean, it's against the law to go to Costco without spending $100. I'm just saying. 600. And so guess what you probably need? You probably need a Costco line item in your budget.
Right.
Otherwise, it just bites you and you didn't expect it. So again, you can be purposeful even on a Costco run. Yeah.
Do you ever go, do you ever take from, your fund, the fund savings that you have, like you said your wife has gardening, and goals. Do you ever, say, I'm going to take away from my clothing fund to
Rob Peter to pay Paul.
Yeah.
That's a funny story. She asked if we ever take funds from one envelope into another. That's a funny story. So I really now I do this for a living, and I've been doing it for almost 30 years, right? I believe in this stuff, but I still kind of like what I like sometimes. And so that little kid in me comes out. And so I was telling her, I just want to go out to eat. She goes, well, the envelope's empty. I said, I know, but I just want to go out to eat. She goes, the envelope's empty. I'm like, I do this for a living. You don't have to remind me. I know. The envelope's empty. But I really want to go out to eat. You're reading my script? I went into the drawer and I got my envelope for golf, and I pulled some out and I came and said, we're going out to eat. She goes, where'd that come from? I said, my golf. She goes, well, now you know that's one less round of golf. I said, I know, I just really want to go out to eat.
Yeah.
So it was, I did that one time in over 20 years, right? But I just really wanted to go out that night. And so I did. I robbed from Peter to pay Paul. It's your budget. It's your sinking funds. You can do what you want. I wouldn't recommend too often, but it's totally up to you.
Right.
That's a budget is not restricted. It's not restricting, right? A budget is freeing. You can make all these decisions for yourself. You can make it as unstressful as you want. You make the decisions together with your spouse if you're married. So. Well, we are time to quit. I'm happy to stand around and ask questions after we're officially over here. But thank you. Was this helpful?
Yeah.
Thank you. And I'm around here, so be happy to just talk to you. I'll be here tonight too. God bless you.
Thank you. It works so good. You know, it just does. Trees on my house. And the oak trees have grown. They built a house.
It's time for the last step. Budget step 3. Expenses
Oh,
profit.
you bet. Absolutely. Thank you so much. You're welcome.
Every dollar does this step for you as you go.
So I said, he said, well, you got
You've got money left.
He said, you can cut down the trees
Yeah.
so that you can
That next race is mine.
or you can take and move this house back a little bit so they're not, the trees aren't right on it.
Let him know that his sister is right.
And I said, why can't you move my house? He said, exactly. So you can move the trees. So they're, well, duh, I gotta move.
Here,
The oak trees were small at the time, and they built the front of the house too close to those trees and didn't give them any room for her. So now that they have grown, and now we saw that 30 years ago, we never did thought those trees are one day going to be in our house because they're really growing. It just wasn't enough. So I walked up and down, I was like, just looking up. That's right.
Mr. Lester,
Yes, ma'am.
so you got a web, so there's an app. I done signed up for the app.
She cut the app on, but she's got somebody who's
Oh, every
technology,
dollar app?
technical.
Yeah, well, you mentioned it, so I went ahead and
Yeah,
got on.
it's free. That's the basic version, but it'll do the budget for you. It'll do everything. It won't connect your bank to the app. There's a premium version. Where do you go to church? Are you from out of town?
Yeah, in Kansas City. Actually, Pastor Dustin's been my worship leader. I'm at World Revival Church.
You need.
Well, Pastor Steve, his mom, his sister, Pastor Dustin.
You need to ask your pastor if he'd consider getting what we call a site license.
Okay.
Pastor Dustin did it for here. And with a site license, everyone in the congregation becomes a member of what we refer to as Ramsey Plus. Now, if you have Ramsey Plus offers all kinds of perks, like the premium version of the Every Dollar app, so you can actually connect your bank account to it. And so when you have like a deposit, it'll tell you in the app you got to spend this money.
Because there's people that's in that financial season.
Yeah. financial piece is available to the entire congregation at no cost. And so basically what the church would be doing is they'd be sponsoring the entire congregation. And it's called a site license.
Site license. I was in the financial piece.
Right.
And then in 2018,
And like seriously, there's like
I had a six-figure job
yeah,
at the Sprint for
starting
20
an
years.
account for all the
And,
kids.
and I
Now,
was already in the program.
and it's just
but I
like
had horrible
that's like put a little bit of money in
Again,
this.
remember the church
Each
and
month,
all
and then
and
like by
I
the
was just
time
like
they get that
mercy
age,
and
it's gonna be yeah.
just given to everybody.
It's gonna be paid off. So if you do
Not really
something like
taking
that,
care of
even if it's not for education,
You know what I learned
it's
doing this? You know what I learned? Maybe the most valuable thing I ever learned, even spiritually. Mercy without wisdom is the most dangerous thing there
Yes,
is.
yes it is.
Mercy without wisdom.
The devil loves it. He loves it when you speak.
Because it becomes enablement.
He loves it when we're done. He loves it. So when I got sick in 2018, I was in the hospital for almost half a year. And then we died. You know, I'm a walking testimony.
Wow.
They took almost everything from my house. And, you know, and so by the time I could go back to work and everything again and everything, and when they tried to take my house from behind, that's right when the court was just about to start.
Oh, yeah.
And they were like, well, you have to file bankruptcy. And I was like, well, I believe you should pay what you owe. So I'm going to do that. You know what I mean? You know, I'm sick, you know, I was going to do it. And so I just filed bankruptcy chapter 13 so I could still have to get a budget to pay it back. And so that's what I did. I'm a business owner of my own.
And it protects you from the creditors.
Yep, and so I pay, you know, I pay every month. I'll have 30 some odd payments by March. I'm getting things together. My house is not in the bankruptcy.
right.
Only over $100,000 and everything else. I've been living for cash. If it wasn't for the fact that I was already living off cash for all those years before, I would have been in trouble.
Nice.
So, and I didn't have a car, and so I bought my car cash. I went from driving a Benz. I went from driving a Benz to driving a Kia Spectra, but I paid $1,300 for it. I did not care. Going to business meetings, whatever, and all my friends and everything, they're all in their nice old cars. And I did not care because nobody was going to come to me. I learned a valuable lesson. I might not have did anything wrong to lose all, but I learned a valuable lesson.
Right. He's like, we're all family. Like, I'll sell you. And he's like, don't make this awkward, bro. I'm like,
It was I couldn't take care of God's kingdom. I couldn't do the things that I was doing before. I could take care of a lot of youth.
I think now we should do something like this. I think it's awesome.
Community.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, you can. Getting out of work to go to meetings. Or like community events or whatever. You can't even do that if you have a 9 to 5 that's
Oh, yeah, it's embarrassing for us to hear. Let us know the
an
answer.
hourly job. You're not salaried. You can't get to a community event session.
Without losing money, losing income. Right.
Oh, yeah, so I learned.
I'm going to see if I can try to figure out how to turn this on.
Turn it off.
Oh, for in and out, for in and out, for in and out, it's like
But I don't have money to lose.
and the habit is like
Me too. I got my emergency phone. I told him, I was like, okay, so how am I supposed to do this? And he said, do you have an emergency phone? I said, yes. He said, well, that's how you use it. I said, but I'll use it all. And he said, that's why you have it. I'm like, then I have to start over.
That's right.
at a restaurant.
But you know what's cool
I don't want to
about
let
it
go
though?
of it. It's so hard.
But I just think about this. So my house. So my house.
And so
So
it's
this
like,
whole basement. So I have all these embroidery machines, cutters, vinyl. I mean, thousands of dollars of stuff. And so, and it's almost like a hoarded situation where it all needed to be redone. I needed new flooring, everything. And I was like, well, you already know what happens. You know, all the stuff that happened, I can't afford to get all this stuff done, and I still need to make money to do what needs to be done. I'm just going to allow you to do it.
We have that at home.
And this is what you do it. Because none of my pipes was the pipes that was broken. it was none of it was my fault. The Kansas City water meter is broken, so they have to pay for everything. It is their responsibility.
And did the city do that?
Huh?
She's still fighting.
Has the city done that?
Well, the thing is, my insurance company is now involved, and so they call it serve.
Kansas City, so we have to go listen to her story.
Huh?
Oh, we're from Kansas City.
Oh yeah.
So that's why we know.
Oh yeah. So what has happened is that my insurance company is down there. This happened in August now.
Right.
So ServPro is actually at my house now. They've been there all week. Cutting out the carpet. They had like a group of food packing up my office. Cutting out the wall. The insurance company wasn't going to let them do asbestos testing or whatever, but it's mandatory by state. Your house is it's 1985. They have to do asbestos testing to make sure it is. But it's definitely, I mean, this story, I put it on, I call the problem solvers. I called Wes Mender, the new Kansas City director. I put it on their Facebook page. I mean, I'm a project program manager. I wrote a root cause analysis. I said, here was the situation. Here was the action. Here's what happened. Leaf and Sons, the contractors from down there, they didn't have nothing to do with it. If it hadn't been for them, it would have been a full flood.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, it would have been bad if it hadn't been for those contractors coming down to my aid.
actually cheaper than
Not at all. So you guys live in Kansas City?
We did for 30 years. We just moved back to Santa Fe like 21 months ago.
Oh,
So
okay.
we retired from Kansas City.
Oh great. All
So
right.
yeah.
No, I was gonna say I appreciate your story earlier of generosity. It's very cool and you see Kansas City. So.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, well, at World Bible Church, at first I was a minister at Light of Life at St. Peter's, but I worked for Sprint for 20 or 6 years.
So now you don't work
And
for
so-
T-Mobile anymore.
No, I don't work for T-Mobile anymore, and so now I'm a consultant. I own my own
Okay,
business
yeah,
and
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
in ministry, and so I preach and sing and do different
do?
things.
So do you know Joyce and Kuda and that group too?
Yes, I do.
Okay,
I do.
alrighty.
Uh-huh.
All right.
And so you guys go to Hope, you see
In Santa Fe
in
now.
Santa Fe. Oh,
But our daughter from Kansas City flew in too, so she's here at this conference as well. She goes to Glory Church. You know that one? It's like kind of new work.
where is that?
True.
So
It's on
Is it in
Truth.
Kansas City?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
yeah, so we grew up in Kansas City Baptist Temple,
Okay.
55th and Blue Ridge.
Okay.
It's called Graceway now.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Jeff Adams was a pastor. And
This is Paseo. It used to be the Paseo where
Yes,
Yes,
that's
uh-huh.
the original.
Yeah,
You're
well,
right.
no,
You're
Aaron,
right.
Aaron Lavender is his church used to be down on the Paseo,
It
and
was.
now because actually St. Peter's church at 87th and Odom